He thought it would be just another awkward blind date. But when she walked into the diner dressed in a soldier's uniform with 5 little girls trailing behind her, he nearly stood up and walked out. What happened next? It didn't just change his night. It changed all of their lives. Subscribe CTA Natural and Warm. Before we begin, if you believe in second chances, quiet acts of love, and the healing power of unexpected kindness, consider subscribing to our channel. We share true-to-life stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. Now let's begin this unforgettable journey. The snow had started early that afternoon, gentle, lazy flakes at first drifting like ash from an old chimney. But by dusk, it thickened into a quiet storm that swallowed the streets of Maplewood whole. Street lights flickered through the white curtain. Cars moved slower, cautious, and inside the old diner on the corner of Pine and Main, the smell of cinnamon pie and fresh coffee wrapped around the warmth like a quilt. Beau Callahan stood in the doorway, brushing snow off his shoulders, shaking it from the brim of his old felt hat. He didn't take it off yet. His eyes scanned the booths out of habit, not suspicion, just the residue of too many years watching for trouble. Old habits die hard, especially when they were once part of your survival. He looked good. He didn't think so, but he did. 35 strong build from years of physical work, sun-kissed skin that even a Midwest winter couldn't bleach, and long, wavy blonde hair that brushed his collar. He wore a light beige button-down shirt, dark jeans, and a belt with a silver buckle that caught the light when he moved. This wasn't his scene. Blind dates weren't his thing. Neither was talking too much. But tonight he was here, dragged by the memory of someone who used to laugh more than she cried. Caroline, his late wife. 6 years is long enough to be lonely, her mother had told him over the phone just a week ago. She'd want you to sit at a table with more than just your grief. So here he was, a table for one, until maybe someone showed up. He walked over to the corner booth, the one he used to sit in with Caroline back when they were just 2 kids stealing afternoons together. The waitress, Debbie, mid-50s, bright red lipstick that matched her warmth, gave him a nod. "She's not here yet," she asked softly, filling a mug with coffee without him needing to ask. "Don't think so," Beau replied, sliding into the booth. "But then again, I'm not sure what I'm looking for." Debbie gave a sympathetic smile and placed the mug in front of him. "You'll know. You always do." He wrapped his hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. Outside, snow piled on window ledges. Inside, the radio played something soft and old. Families ate their meals. Kids laughed at the dessert counter. And Beau stared into his coffee like it held all the answers he couldn't bring himself to ask. Just as he reached for the sugar, the bell above the diner door rang again. He looked up and froze. She walked in like she wasn't aware of the weather, like the snow had parted for her. Straight-backed, composed, commanding. Her dark navy U.S. Marine dress uniform was immaculate buttons, polished metals pinned with precision, and the white belt cinched tight around her trim waist. Her blonde hair was tied back into a clean, no-nonsense bun. And her face. It was beautiful. Not in a flashy way, but in the kind that made you feel like she'd already seen everything about you and hadn't run. But that wasn't what stopped him. Behind her were 5 little girls, all dressed in soft pink woolen dresses, all wearing matching white knit hats, like a line of snowflakes come to life. They clung close to her eyes, wide cheeks red from the cold, each one looking like a petal torn from the same blossom. Beau blinked. Once. Twice. The woman spotted him, smiled genuinely warmly, and led the girls toward his booth. "You must be Beau," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Maeve Quinn. Sorry we're a little late. Parking with this crew takes strategy." He stood still, stunned, and shook her hand. "You're Maeve." The blind date guilty, she said with a half grin. Then she gestured to the girls. And this is my entourage. Don't worry, they're house-trained. Mostly. Beau's mouth opened, but words failed him. He glanced at the 5 pairs of eyes staring at him with cautious curiosity. I thought it was a one-on-one thing he finally managed. Mavi's eyes softened. I don't believe in pretending. These girls are my life. I thought, if you were going to meet me, really meet me, you should meet them too. She nodded toward the other side of the booth. Mind if we join you? He hesitated, but then he saw it. One of the girls, maybe 6 or 7, was trying to hide behind Mavi's leg, but she peeked out long enough to look at him and whisper, "Is that our new friend?" Mama Beau's chest tightened unexpectedly. He stepped back and waved toward the booth. Of course? Please. They slid in like practiced choreography, one sitting beside Mavi, the other squishing into the long bench. Laughter bubbled as one nearly knocked over the water glass. Sorry, Mavi said, reaching to catch it. They're still learning what it means to fit. Don't worry, Beau said, settling across from them, still absorbing everything. So am I. And then suddenly he smiled. Really smiled for the first time in a long time. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside that booth, a man with no plans, a woman with nothing to hide, and 5 small pieces of wonder had just rewritten the meaning of a table for 2. The smell of grilled cheese and hot chocolate wafted through the air as the waitress returned with a tray full of mismatched kids' mugs and menus. Debbie raised a curious eyebrow at Beau while setting down the cocoa. All this for you, she teased under her breath. Beau chuckled quietly and shook his head. Long story. Mavi caught the exchange and smiled. We have a lot of stories, she said, helping one of the girls stir her cocoa, though most of them involve glitter dragons or very serious tea parties. Beau watched her move, calm, gentle, efficient. She poured sugar into one girl's mug without being asked, adjusted another's knit cap, and gave a soft nudge to the youngest, who was trying to drink too fast. The girls responded to her with the kind of quiet trust that wasn't taught, just earned. These girls, he said slowly, they're yours. In every way that matters, Mavi answered, then glanced at him. But no, not biologically. Beau didn't press. He just nodded and reached for his own mug. There's something, he murmured. The girl sitting nearest to him beamed. We're the 5 petals, Beau asked, raising an eyebrow. The girls all giggled. That's what Mama calls us, said the oldest, who had freckles across her nose and a protective air about her. 'Cause we're all different, but we stick together like a flower. Mavi smiled, slightly embarrassed. I might have said that once. Now it's gospel. Beau grinned, and something unfamiliar stirred in his chest, something lighter than what usually lived there. He looked at each girl more closely now. The youngest, maybe 5, clutched a stuffed bunny with fur so worn it was practically translucent. She hadn't said a word yet, but was watching Beau with big, curious eyes. Next to her sat 2 girls who looked close in age, twins maybe. One had a missing front tooth, and the other wore a pink, beaded bracelet that looked handmade. The 4th had a slight limp as she scooted into the booth, her cocoa untouched, while she hummed softly under her breath. And then there was the oldest, probably 9 or 10. She was composed, observant, and clearly the silent captain of this little ship. Mavi noticed his gaze. They came to me from different places, she said, different stories, some rougher than others. Beau looked down at his coffee, swirling the last bit of cream. You adopted them, not legally. Yet Mavi said, but they live with me, eat with me, laugh and cry and throw cereal at me. I'd go to war for them again if I had to. She sipped her own cocoa, eyes thoughtful. I didn't come tonight to pretend I'm someone else, Bo. I know this is a lot of noise, a lot of backstory, but I've spent too long trying to convince the world that I'm manageable. I'm not. Life isn't. But I am honest. Bo met her eyes. There was steel in them, but not the cold kind. It was earned, forged in experience. He liked that. You know, he said slowly, when I got here and saw you walk in with the girls, I thought maybe I'd been set up. Maevie laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made one of the girls giggle. I get that a lot, she said. But no, this wasn't a prank, just real life, unfiltered. One of the twins tugged on Maevie's sleeve. Can I go pick a song on the jukebox? Ask Mr. Bo, she said gently. It's his booth tonight. The girl looked at Bo, eyes round. Can I please? He nodded, surprised at how easily the word came out. Go ahead. She dashed off, her sister chasing her. Sorry, Maevie said. They have jukebox rituals. Let me guess. Bo smiled. One picks the song, the other presses the buttons. Maevie laughed again. Every single time. He took a deep breath and leaned back. I didn't expect this. Any of it. I know, she said softly. But sometimes the best things come wrapped in the most unexpected chaos. Bo turned to the youngest girl, still cradling her bunny. What's your name, sweetheart? She didn't answer. Maevie leaned in. That's Lottie. She doesn't speak much, but she hears everything. She'll talk when she's ready. Lottie looked up at him, and for a second, Bo could swear she smiled. Hi, Lottie, he said gently. Nice to meet you. She nodded once, solemn. Debbie returned with a tray of grilled cheese sandwiches and hot soup. Plates were past napkins tucked under chins, and Coco slurped with delight. And in that moment, amid the chatter, clinking spoons and jukebox music softly playing Patsy Cline, something shifted inside Bo. He was still a man carrying grief, still a father who had buried love too soon. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just remembering what had been lost. He was witnessing what could still be found. Maevie caught him looking not at her, but at all of them. The girls, the mess, the unexpected beauty of it all. She spoke low so only he could hear. You don't have to say yes to all of this, Bo, but I needed you to see what me really looks like. Bo didn't speak right away. He looked down at the table, then around the booth. 5 mugs, 5 little bowls, 5 wool hats piled at the corner, all surrounding a woman who looked like both a soldier and a soft place to land. I'm not scared, he said finally. Just surprised. She smiled. Then we're halfway there. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the table for one had become something else entirely. By the time dinner plates were cleared, the corner booth had turned into a scene out of a holiday postcard. The window beside them fogged from breath and warmth. Laughter echoed from the girls' end of the booth as they whispered secrets and traded spoonfuls of whipped cream from each other's cocoa mugs. Bo sat quietly, not in retreat, but in observation. Something rare was unfolding, and he didn't want to interrupt it by speaking too soon. He hadn't planned on staying this long. He'd intended to politely make it through a 45-minute dinner, and then head home maybe with a kind thank you and a good luck handshake. But here he was, leaning into every word, noticing every detail, from the way Maevie's eyes darted to each girl like a quiet sentry, to how she always seemed to be a step ahead of their needs, without them ever asking. He was used to stillness. After Caroline passed, his house became a cathedral of silence. Polished floors, unread books, one coffee mug always waiting in the dish rack. But here, in the hum of children's voices and cocoa slurps, something in him stirred like an old piano being played for the first time in years. Tell me something, he finally said. Eyes on Maevie. Why bring them tonight? Myvi took a sip of coffee. Black, no sugar. You mean, instead of leaving them home and pretending I'm a woman with no strings? He nodded. Exactly. She leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. Because I'm tired of editing myself to be likable. Her voice wasn't sharp, just honest. I've spent years shrinking, smiling just enough, hiding just enough to make other people comfortable. But these girls, she glanced toward them. They're not baggage. They're not a burden. They're the reason I still believe the world has some good left in it. Bo looked at the girls again. The twins were now drawing shapes with their fingers in the condensation on the window. Lottie had finally taken a bite of her sandwich and was now holding it triumphantly, like she'd climbed a mountain. Most men Myvi continued see 5 kids and a uniform and run. I get it. It's a lot. It's not cute or sexy or easy. But if I have to start off a connection by hiding the best parts of my life, what's the point? Bo said nothing for a moment. Then he smiled a soft, lopsided grin that only appeared when he meant it. That's brave, he said. Myvi tilted her head. Is it brave or just tired of being disappointed? A little of both, maybe, he said. He reached for his cocoa, only to realize it had long gone cold. Still, he sipped it like it was fine wine. Your wife, Myvi said gently. She passed. How long ago? 6 years, he said, setting the cup down. Caroline. Breast cancer. It came fast. Took everything faster. Myvi's face softened. I'm sorry. Bo nodded. I wasn't ready to lose her. Still not some days. People tell you grief gets easier. It doesn't. It just gets quieter. Like background music you forget is playing until a certain song or smell or Tuesday reminds you she's still not there. I know that song, Myvi said quietly. Mine's a different version, but the chorus feels the same. He studied her face. You lost someone. She nodded. My husband. He was Navy, deployed overseas. His convoy never made it back. Bo's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, something like respect. I'm sorry, he said. Me too, she replied. We were only married a year. They sat in silence, not awkward, not forced, just 2 people holding a quiet space that had long been empty. One of the twins interrupted them, scooting closer. Mr. Bo, do you know any magic tricks? Bo raised an eyebrow. Magic? Yeah, like pulling coins out of ears or turning napkins into birds. Bo smiled. Well, I don't know about birds, but I can do this. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a quarter. With a flick of his wrist, it disappeared, then reappeared behind the girl's ear. Her gasp was so loud, even Debbie at the counter looked over. Do it again, she squealed, bouncing in her seat. Bo laughed an open, hearty laugh that caught even him by surprise. Myvi watched it all with quiet joy. It wasn't just the trick. It was the way he leaned in, the way his hands were gentle with her daughters, the way his presence didn't shrink the space, but somehow made it feel more full. You're good with kids, she said, when the girls turned back to their drawing. He shrugged. Used to be a camp counselor in college. Thought I'd be a teacher once. Life had other ideas. You're not uncomfortable. He met her eyes. Myvi, I thought this would be a strange night, maybe even a disaster. But sitting here, hearing your story, watching your girls laugh, it doesn't feel strange. It feels needed. By them, she asked softly. No, he said. By me. Myvi's throat tightened. She wasn't someone who cried easily. Too many years in the service, too many nights learning how to swallow tears like gravel. But now her chest warmed in that specific way only truth could spark. I wasn't sure you'd stay, she said. Most men don't last through cocoa. I almost didn't, Bo admitted with a chuckle. But then one of them called me her new friend. And that kind of thing is hard to walk away from. Myvi smiled a slow, grateful smile. I'm glad you stayed. The check came. Bo reached for it instinctively. Split? Myvi asked. He hesitated, then shook his head. Tonight I'd like to treat the petals. She raised an eyebrow. You remembered the nickname. Hard to forget something that pure. They stood and gathered coats and gloves. The girls formed their line again, 5 snow-colored dots in a parade of pink and wool. As they headed to the door, Myvi turned back. Bo, she said. Yeah, she smiled gently. Would you like to do this again sometime? He didn't have to think. I'd like that very much. And outside in the quiet hush of falling snow, 5 little footprints and 2 larger ones began to overlap like fate, deciding to trace a new path from a table that once had only 1 chair. Snow blanketed Maplewood in a hushed kind of peace, the streets emptying as shopkeepers locked doors and porch lights flickered on across the neighborhood. Myvi's old SUV rumbled gently in the parking lot as she buckled the girls in one by one, their pink hats bobbing like flower buds swaying in the wind. Bo stood nearby, hands in his coat pockets, watching quietly. Lottie, still clutching her threadbare bunny, was the last to be helped into her seat. She turned to look at Bo through the fogged window, her small face half lit by the warm glow of the diner behind him. Myvi closed the car door and exhaled. They're full of cocoa-grilled cheese and sugar, she said, brushing snow from her shoulder. I may have unleashed chaos for the next 48 hours. Bo smiled. They're good kids. Polite. Bright. They're survivors, Myvi replied, which is another word for kids who've seen too much too early, but still find ways to smile. Bo nodded. The air between them wasn't heavy, but it carried weight. The good kind. The kind that meant they'd said enough to each other earlier that didn't need repeating. You sure you want to drive in this? He asked, nodding toward the thickening snow. Myvi glanced at the windshield. Not ideal. But we've been through worse. He hesitated. You live far. She smiled faintly. Out past the reservoir. Old farmhouse. It was supposed to be temporary until the next post. But the girls fell in love with the fields and I... She trailed off, then shrugged. Sometimes life tells you to stay put, even if you don't know why yet. Bo didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a quiet step forward and reached out. His hand brushed snowflakes off her shoulder, small, almost unconscious. The kind of gesture no one rehearses, but the body remembers when it finds something it forgot it missed. Myvi's eyes met his. There was no spark of flirtation, no expectation, just warmth. Familiarity, a quiet agreement that something unexpected had begun. You got time for a question before you drive off? He asked. She nodded. Why me? Bo said. Out of everyone, I'm a widower with calloused hands and not much to offer except a quiet house and a beat-up truck. Myvi studied him for a long moment. Her voice was soft when she answered. Because when I first read your name, something told me you weren't here to impress. You weren't selling anything. You weren't performing. You were just showing up. She paused, then added, I didn't need someone to rescue me. I needed someone who could hold still while the world kept spinning. And you strike me as someone who doesn't mind standing still. Bo's throat tightened, not from sadness, but recognition. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time, he said. From the back seat of the SUV, a tiny voice piped up, muffled by glass, but unmistakable. Mr. Bo? It was Lottie. He leaned toward the window. Yeah, sweetheart. Her voice was almost a whisper. I wish it was tomorrow already. Bo blinked. Why's that? She smiled with the kind of innocence that could crack the hardest armor. So we could see you again. Bo looked at Myvi. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't look away. He stepped back and gave a small salute to the window. "Tomorrow's not far, little one." The girls giggled in chorus, and Maivo slid into the driver's seat, starting the engine. The headlights lit up the snow, swirling in front of them like dancing ghosts. She rolled down the window halfway. "Thank you," she said, "for not running when things got real." Bo grinned. "Thanks for not running when I messed up the coin trick." She laughed, softly shifted into drive, and pulled away. Bo stood still, watching the taillights fade into the snowy dusk. The moment lingered long after the car disappeared. It stayed in the imprint of tiny boots in the snow, in the echo of giggles still caught in his coat, in the lingering warmth of a table meant for two that somehow fit six. He turned toward his truck, opened the door, but didn't get in. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old folded card. The RSVP for the blind date. His friend Paul, a Navy buddy from years ago, had mailed it to him as a joke, scrawling in blue ink, "This is not a setup, just a woman worth meeting." Give it one night. He opened the card again, reading the scribbled address and phone number, but this time his eyes lingered on the name Mavi Quinn. He stood there in the snow card in hand and smiled. What started as a polite dinner had turned into something far more rare, a glimmer of newness. Not the kind that swept you off your feet, but the kind that made you believe your feet might want to start moving again. The snow continued to fall, but Bo Callahan didn't feel cold anymore. Saturday arrived cloaked in the kind of crisp, golden light that only follows a heavy snowfall. Maplewood's streets were freshly plowed, but icicles still clung to rooftops like glass ornaments. At the corner of Pine and Main, the old diner buzzed with life locals catching up over pancakes, laughter rising like steam from mugs of coffee. Bo Callahan stood by the front window, tugging his gloves off and scanning the booths. This time he wasn't nervous. He'd made the reservation under the name Petals, Party of Six. A booth wasn't enough, not for what he had in mind. So he'd asked Debbie to push 2 tables together near the big window, where the light poured in brightest and where the girls could press their fingers against the foggy glass. Debbie approached him with a raised brow and a teasing smirk. Back so soon, Romeo Bo smiled sheepish. "Might be the first time I've made a second reservation for the same woman in 1 week." Debbie handed him a fresh coffee. "I set out 6 place settings just like you asked, and I stocked extra whipped cream for the little ones." He looked down at the table, 6 mugs already waiting, 5 with bendy straws, and 1 plain white ceramic for Mavi. It was strange how easily he remembered small things about people he'd only just met. But then again, maybe that was what happened when something mattered. The bell above the door rang. He turned, and there they were. Mavi entered first, her winter coat open just enough to show a soft gray sweater beneath her olive green scarf. Her hair was looser today, no bun, just gently pulled back in a braid. She looked different. Not less strong, just softer around the edges, like someone who'd finally let the sun touch their skin again. Behind her came the girls in a formation that now felt familiar. Lottie in the middle, Bunny clutched tight. The twins arm in arm, the oldest leading like a mini general. "Hey there," Bo greeted, stepping forward. Lottie's eyes lit up. "You kept your promise." Bo knelt to her level. "I said tomorrow's not far. And look, it's already today." She threw her arms around him without warning. It was brief, a child's hug, but it landed like a warm brick in his chest. Mavi smiled. "You've been promoted from friend to safe person. That's big." Bo stood touched. "I'll do my best to live up to the rank." He guided them to the table, and the girls slid into their spots, like dancers returning to a familiar stage. The twins immediately began rearranging silverware into star patterns. The oldest helped Lottie out of her coat, then whispered something that made her giggle. Bo watched Mavi as she settled in her eyes, sweeping the table with the quiet grace of someone who didn't take peaceful moments for granted. Coffee Bo offered, lifting the carafe Debbie had left. She nodded. "Thank you." As he poured, Myvie glanced around and said, "You remembered everything." He shrugged. Didn't want to get demoted. The meal passed like a slow river, easy, natural. They talked about snowmen, and school, about Mavie's talent for burning pancakes, and Bo's tragic inability to braid hair. The girls told him about their made-up holiday called Second Christmas, which apparently involved costumes, pillow fights, and hiding chocolate under the couch. Bo promised to attend if he was invited. "You're already on the guest list," said the oldest, with a seriousness that made it sound like an oath. After plates were cleared, the girls begged for jukebox time again, and Myvie handed them a few quarters. One by one, they ran off, leaving Myvie and Bo with a rare pocket of quiet. She looked at him. "I was afraid you wouldn't call." He met her gaze. "I almost didn't. Not because I didn't want to. I just didn't think I was allowed to want anything again." Mavie softened. "I know that feeling. You start thinking the best parts of your life are behind you, but then one of those best parts throws whipped cream at her sister and calls you her new favorite grown-up." He chuckled. "That happened fast." Mavie stirred the last of her coffee. "Kids don't wait around for adults to decide if they're ready. They just decide for you." Bo nodded, then quieter. "I've been alone a long time." "So have I," she replied, "even when I wasn't." They fell into silence again, but it wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of them needed to say, because sometimes the truth speaks loudest through comfort. Suddenly, one of the twins returned holding a napkin. "It's for you," she said, handing it to Bo. He unfolded it. In the center was a crayon drawing 6 stick figures holding hands. A tall blonde man with cowboy boots, a woman in a long braid, and 5 tiny girls, each with a pink heart above their heads. At the top, in clumsy purple lettering, "Our table." Bo swallowed hard. "This is beautiful." "It's your table now, too," the twin said matter-of-factly, then ran off. Mavie leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "I think this table used to be for one." Myvie looked at him, heart in her eyes. "Not anymore." Just then, the jukebox played a crackling version of "You Are My Sunshine," and without anyone saying a word, Lottie climbed out of her seat, walked over to Bo, and sat beside him. No words, just her bunny in one hand, and her head on his arm. Mavie watched quiet. Bo reached across the table and took Myvie's hand. She didn't pull away. Outside, snow still lined the streets. But inside that diner, lit by warm bulbs and the sounds of soft laughter, the table that had once seated a grieving man now held something entirely new. A woman with hope in her eyes. 5 girls who still believed in magic. And a man who had finally, quietly, irrevocably, begun to believe in it again, too. The first time Bo saw Mavie's farmhouse, it reminded him of the kind of place you see on old postcards. Wide porch, leaning barn, out back, tire swing hanging from a crooked oak. But it wasn't the paint that made it special. It was the shoes by the door. 5 tiny pairs lined up in different directions. The smell of cinnamon and laundry inside. The faint sound of giggles echoing down the hallway. He hadn't planned to come over so soon, but Myvie had invited him the following weekend. "If you're not afraid of glitter and loud opinions," she'd joked. He wasn't. Not anymore. Now he stood in her kitchen sleeves, rolled helping slice apples, while Mavie stirred something on the stove. The twins had discovered Bo's cowboy whistle and were chasing each other in circles trying to mimic it. Lottie sat on the counter next to a bowl of cookie dough, dipping one finger in with great stealth. The eldest Anna was outside stacking snow into small bricks, like she was preparing for war or an ambitious igloo. There was no space for loneliness in that house. The air was filled with too much life. But even in the warmth, Bo knew somewhere beneath all this joy, there were still stories unsaid. As Mavi moved past him to reach a jar on the top shelf, her sleeve pulled up, revealing a thin scar running along her inner forearm. It wasn't long, but it was sharp, clean, purposeful. She noticed him glance, didn't flinch. "I got that in Kandahar," she said, voice steady. Bo set his knife down slowly. "Combat IED," she replied. "Convoy was ambushed. We lost 2. I made it back with that and a cracked shoulder. Medics patched me up. VA patched up what came after." She turned the heat down on the stove and leaned against the counter. "I don't tell many people that part. Not because I'm ashamed. Just, people either pity you or pedestal you. And I don't want either." Bo didn't move. "I'm not going to do either." She gave him a long, searching look, then nodded once. He reached behind and poured 2 mugs of coffee from the pot that had been silently steaming behind them. He handed her one. They stood there, shoulder to shoulder, the kitchen finally quiet for a moment. "Caroline was sick for 14 months, Bo said softly. "At first they thought it was just a cyst, then it wasn't. By the time they started chemo, the cancer had already made up its mind." Maivy held her mug tighter. She was 32, strong as a stallion, never once complained, not even when her hair came out in clumps. He paused, jaw tight. But the worst part wasn't watching her die. It was watching her fade. "Yeah," Maivy whispered. "I know that part." Bo glanced toward the living room where the girls were now building a fort out of couch cushions. Their laughter drifted down the hallway like music. "How'd you end up with 5 girls?" he asked gently. Maivy exhaled. "After I came home, I felt useless, broken. The war didn't break me, but the silence after did. One night I saw an ad foster emergency shelter needed for displaced siblings. I didn't think. I just answered." Her voice softened. "They arrived with plastic bags, worn shoes, and no one left in the world. Lottie wouldn't speak. Anna tried to act like their mother. The twins only talked to each other. And Bella, my quiet one, she didn't even look me in the eye for 2 weeks." And now Bo asked. Maivy smiled faintly. "Now they argue about what kind of pancakes to make and fight over who gets to sit in my lap." He chuckled. "I didn't choose them like a parent chooses a school," she continued. "I didn't pick favorites. I just decided they weren't going to be another thing the world gave up on." Bo turned toward her, his voice low. "And who decided that for you?" Maivy blinked. "That you wouldn't be given up on," he clarified. "Who made that choice?" For a moment her armor cracked, not in weakness, but in truth. "I guess I did," she said quietly. "Eventually." Bo nodded. "Me too." The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full. A stillness that held understanding, and maybe something deeper beginning to bloom. Lottie peeked into the kitchen, her mouth smeared with chocolate. "We need help with the roof," Maivy laughed. "Bo's tall. Make him do it." Bo raised his hands in surrender. "I live to serve." They walked together into the living room, where the fort had become an impressive tangle of blankets, cushions, and questionable engineering. The girls handed Bo a pink feather boa as his contractor badge, and he dutifully climbed atop the armchair to secure the roof. As he reached to anchor a blanket, he caught a glimpse of something taped to the back of the bookshelf, a photograph. It was a candid shot Maivy in her uniform standing in the middle of a field, arms around the 5 girls, sun blazing behind them. Her eyes in the photo were tired, but fierce. The girls were all mid-laugh, as if someone had said something ridiculous just before the camera clicked. He stepped down quiet. Later, as the girls dozed off under the fort-turned castle, and Lottie curled beside him with her bunny tucked beneath her chin, Maivy walked over and handed him a folded blanket. "You okay?" she asked. Bo looked down at the sleeping girls. Yeah, he whispered. More than okay. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him. You said you didn't pick them like a school, he said softly. But I think maybe they picked you. Myvi looked at him, eyes shimmering. And maybe Bo continued glancing at Lottie. They're not the only ones. The fire crackled gently in the hearth behind them, and in that small farmhouse, surrounded by hand-drawn pictures, half-finished puzzles, and the echo of loss, neither could erase, two people stood together in the middle of the life neither one had planned, but both had quietly hoped for. The first snowfall of December lingered in quiet drifts along the back porch of Myvi's farmhouse, and Bo Callahan stood inside the old barn-turned workshop, a worn leather apron tied around his waist, and wood shavings dusting his boots. Outside, the world was still. But inside these four walls, the steady rhythm of hand tools, pencil marks, and sanding blocks played like music. It had been years since Bo built anything for someone else. Years since his hands had moved with purpose that reached beyond repairs and routine. But this week, something had shifted. He glanced at the 5 little chairs taking shape around the workbench, each one slightly different in size and detail, each carved with care. On the seat of one, he had begun etching the faint outline of a bunny. Lottie's the threadbare one she carried everywhere. On another, he traced stars and a crescent moon because Bella had whispered she wanted to sit next to the night sky. They weren't commissions. They were gifts. Maybe even something more sacred than that. Bo sanded the last corner smooth, then stepped back. 5 chairs each ready to be finished, stained and polished. Not for sale, not for show, but for a kitchen where joy spilled like syrup and a soldier mom tried every day to stitch piece out of pieces. The barn door creaked open behind him. Myvi stood there, her scarf caught in the breeze, cheeks pink from the cold. You weren't at the front door, she said. Anna said you might be hiding in here. Bo smiled. Not hiding, just building. She stepped inside, eyeing the chairs, her breath caught for a moment. You made these, he nodded, brushing off sawdust from the smallest one. Well, they're still drying. But yeah, thought the petals could use proper thrones. Myvi walked over, slowly tracing her fingers along the curved edge of one chair. Bo, this is beautiful. They deserve beautiful, he said simply. She turned to him, eyes filled with something weightier than gratitude. No one's ever done something like this for them, not even close. Bo shrugged. They've done something for me. It just looks different. She studied him for a moment as though trying to see into the corners of his soul. You're not just building chairs, are you? Bo leaned against the workbench, running a hand through his hair. No, I suppose not. He hesitated, then added, When Caroline was sick, I stopped building. Everything I made started to feel temporary. I didn't want to create something solid while everything else was falling apart. Myvi listened quietly, not interrupting. But lately, he continued, I find myself wanting to make things again. Things that last. Things that belong to people who laugh and spill juice and tell me I'm not cutting sandwiches the right way. She smiled gently. So the chairs are for them, but the making of them is for you. Something like that. She stepped closer, her voice soft. Do you know what Bella told me last night? He shook his head. She said, When I grow up, I want to marry a man who smells like wood and doesn't talk too much but always listens. Bo's face warmed. I don't talk too much, Myvi chuckled. Apparently it's a compliment. They stood there in silence again, that strange and wonderful comfort between two people who didn't need to fill every gap with words. Then she looked down, brushing a finger over the bunny carving. This one's for Lottie, isn't it? Bo nodded. She used to sleep standing up when she first arrived. Maeve said, her voice distant, like she didn't believe any bed could stay hers for long. His jaw clenched lightly. I didn't know how to fix that, she continued. I just sat beside her every night and promised I'd be there in the morning. Bo looked at the chair. Then maybe this is my version of that promise. Maeve's eyes shimmered. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand on his. Bo, she said quietly, I'm not good at needing people. I'm trained to patch holes and move on, I know, he said. But this, she gestured around the room to the chairs, to the way he looked at her girls, like they were his own. This is different. It is, he agreed. She hesitated. Then, with a vulnerability that surprised even herself, she whispered, It scares me. Bo didn't move. Me too. Then he added, But some things are worth being scared for. A gust of wind outside rattled the barn door slightly, as if nature itself was offering punctuation to the moment. From the house, the sound of girls shouting carried on the breeze, something about Coco, something about someone cheating at Go Fish. Maeve stepped back, smiling through her nerves. We should get inside before they decide we've eloped. Bo chuckled. Should I carry you over the threshold? She rolled her eyes but blushed as they walked back toward the house, side by side, not quite hand in hand, but close enough to feel the warmth. Maeve looked up at the sky, now tinged with amber from the setting sun. I never imagined I'd meet someone in the middle of a mess like mine, she said. Bo looked straight ahead. I think you just met someone who doesn't mind the mess. They reached the porch, and before she opened the door, Maeve turned to him. I'm not asking for anything, she said. Just don't disappear. Bo's reply was quiet, certain. I'm not going anywhere. The door opened, releasing a wave of laughter and cocoa fumes, and the sound of Lottie yelling, Mama Bo's chair is next to mine. He smiled, and just before stepping inside, Bo glanced back at the workshop, where 5 tiny chairs sat in soft light, waiting for morning. He wasn't just building furniture. He was building a place to belong. The first snowman of the season stood proudly in Maeve's front yard, lopsided and missing one eye, courtesy of a twin tug-of-war over the final button. A crooked scarf flapped in the breeze, and one of Bo's old cowboy hats rested on its lumpy head. Laughter echoed across the field behind the house, where the girls were building snow forts, the twins locked in a fierce snowball truce that had already collapsed twice. Maeve leaned against the porch post, sipping from a thermos, eyes full of calm. Beside her, Bo tightened the last screw on the tire swing that had hung dormant for years. Didn't think I'd ever see this old thing hold weight again, she said. Bo tugged at the rope one last time. Well, you married a Marine. That rope can probably lift a car. Maeve grinned. You're not wrong. He stood wiping his hands on a rag. Ready for the test run, Maeve raised a brow. If you mean me, not a chance. I meant Lottie. As if summoned, the youngest petal came running from behind the barn arms, out like airplane wings, bunny tucked under one elbow. Her pink boots kicked up flurries behind her. Bo, did you fix it? She called. He crouched down. See for yourself, sweetheart. Lottie scrambled onto the swing with practiced grace and launched into motion, giggling as her boots lifted off the ground. Bo gently pushed her, once then let her sail. She shrieked in joy as the swing creaked in its rhythm, slicing through the winter air. From the porch, Maeve watched with a look Bo had come to recognize, equal parts awe and fear. The awe of seeing your child free. The fear of knowing nothing in life stays still for long. The other girls soon joined, forming a half-circle around the tree, cheering Lottie on. The twins fought over who was next, and Anna assumed the role of referee, hands on hips. And then it happened. As Bo helped Lottie down, she leaned into him, arms wrapping around his neck. Her breath fogged his coat as she whispered just loud enough for the others to hear. "Thanks, Dad." Silence. For half a second, even the wind held its breath. Bo froze, not from shock, but from the weight of the word. It hit harder than any title he'd ever carried. Harder than husband, harder than widower, harder than Mr. Callahan. Dad. The twins looked up. Mavi stood straighter on the porch, and Lottie, unaware she had just shaken. The sky tightened her hug like it was the most natural thing in the world. Bo slowly knelt, his eyes level with hers. He didn't correct her. He didn't glance at Mavi for permission. He simply said with a voice as steady as the swing's rhythm, "You can call me that if it makes you feel safe." Lottie nodded solemnly, like she'd just been handed the keys to something sacred. From the porch, Mavi blinked once, then looked away. It wasn't pain in her eyes. It wasn't even surprise. It was release. Later, as the sky turned lilac and the girls settled inside with mugs of cocoa and marshmallows, Bo found Mavi standing at the sink, rinsing out bowls and staring through the window at the quiet swing. She's never said that before. Mavi said without turning around, "I know." She had a foster once, she continued. The guy tried hard, but Lottie never let him get close. And when he left, she didn't cry. Just packed her things like she expected it. Bo leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I'm not asking what this is," she added. "I'm not asking what it means." "But you feel it," Bo said. Mavi turned toward him. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I feel it, Bo, and I'm terrified." He stepped closer. "So am I." She looked down. "You were never supposed to get this far in." "I didn't mean to," he said honestly. "I just couldn't stop showing up." Mavi smiled faintly. "That's the most dangerous kind of love, you know. The kind that doesn't knock first." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in a flannel rag. Gently, he placed it on the counter and unwrapped it, a small wooden figure. A swing. And sitting on the swing, hand-carved with patient detail, was a little girl with a bunny in her lap. Mavi touched it reverently. "You made this." He nodded. "I don't have words," she whispered. "You don't need them." She looked at him, then really looked, and Bo for once didn't look away. "I need you to know," she said, "I'm not ready to say where this goes. I don't need a map," Bo replied. "Just tell me you'll walk." Mavi's eyes glistened. "I'll walk." They stood in silence, surrounded by warmth, by snow-melted boots drying by the door, by the soft crackle of the wood stove. Outside, the tire swing creaked gently in the wind. Inside, something steadier swung between them, something invisible, but deeply real. As Mavi reached for her mug and sipped slowly, she said, "I used to think love was about promises." Bo waited, but maybe she continued. "Love is just the decision to stay even after the cocoa's gone cold, and the house is a mess, and someone calls you something that breaks your heart open in the best way." He smiled. "Then I'm staying." She nodded. "Good." And as the girls drifted off to sleep that night one by one, in mismatched pajamas and tangled blankets, Bo sat on the couch. Lottie curled against him, her bunny tucked beneath both of them. He looked toward the hallway, where Mavi stood with the light behind her. No words were needed. Tonight, someone had been called Dad, and no one had corrected it. It was a Tuesday. Cold. Gray. The kind of day where the sky forgets what color it used to be, and the sun just doesn't bother trying. Inside Mavi's house, things were unusually quiet. The girls sat at the kitchen table with untouched plates of macaroni and apples. Lottie poked at her food with the back of her spoon. The twins weren't fighting. Anna was staring out the window. Mavi checked the time again. 6:42 p.m. Bo was never late. Not once since the day he showed up with 5 tiny chairs in the back of his truck. Not once since the first time he fixed the porch light without being asked. Not once since he promised Lottie, "I'm not going anywhere." But now he was gone. No message. No call. And for reasons she couldn't fully explain, Maeve felt something beneath the disappointment fear. She tried to shake it off. Told herself he might be tied up with a repair, or maybe his truck slid off one of the back roads. Still, she kept glancing at the window every time headlights passed, each time ending in a small silence that landed heavier than the last. Mama Bella's voice was soft. Did Bo forget? Maeve forced a smile. "I'm sure he's just running behind." Anna pushed her chair back, scraping the floor. Maybe we should have never called him Dad. That one hit harder than Maeve was ready for. She stood grabbing a dish towel just to have something in her hands. "Bo's a good man," she said. "Sometimes grown-ups get pulled away by things they can't control. But he always tells us," Lottie whispered. "He always says, when." Maeve had no answer. That night, she tucked the girls into bed with more effort than usual. The twins didn't argue over who got the pink blanket. Bella didn't ask for 2 bedtime stories. Lottie simply clutched her bunny and said nothing. Maeve stood in the hallway long after the lights were off, arms folded across her chest, fighting the ghost of something she'd buried years ago, the ache of being left. Not again, she thought. Not this time. The next morning, just after dawn, a familiar engine rumbled down the gravel road. Maeve was already outside, boots crunching over frost, as Bo's old pickup pulled to a stop beside the barn. He stepped out slower than usual. No coat. Eyes shadowed with something deeper than fatigue. Maeve didn't speak. He held out a worn cardboard box, something tucked under his arm. "I brought something." She stared at him. "I know I should have called," he said. "I should have told you. You think her voice wasn't sharp, but it wasn't soft either." He looked down. "I went to see someone yesterday. Someone I've been putting off for years." Maeve waited. "My mother-in-law," Bo said quietly. "Caroline's mom," that softened her. "I've kept a box of things, Caroline's old photos, letters, her music box. I've been holding on to it like it was sacred. Like letting go meant forgetting. And I realized, if I'm going to keep a promise to your girls, to you, I had to keep one last promise to Caroline first." Maeve's voice was hushed. What promise? That I'd let myself live again. Fully. Honestly. Without the guilt. He handed her the box. "I'm not giving her away," he said. "I'm giving her peace. And I think she'd want me to stop looking backward." Maeve took the box gently. "Why didn't you just say that last night?" Bo's eyes filled with quiet apology. "Because I was scared that if I said goodbye to my past, I wouldn't be welcome in your future." She stepped forward. "You're late," she said. And the girls were heartbroken. "I know." And Lottie didn't touch her dinner. Bo winced. "That one hurts. She called you Dad 5 days ago. You don't get to disappear after that." He nodded. "You're right." Maeve sighed. "But you showed up, and that's what they'll remember." He looked at her carefully. "What about you?" "I'll remember this," she said, lifting the box. "The courage it takes to grieve out loud. The way you choose to come back even when it's hard." A long pause passed between them, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. Bo finally spoke. "Can I see them?" "They're inside, getting ready for school." He started toward the porch, but Maeve stopped him with a hand on his arm. "They still believe in you," she said. "So don't give them a reason to unlearn that." "I won't." He stepped inside. The moment Lottie saw him, her bunny dropped to the floor, and she ran, arms out, eyes shining. Bo scooped her up without a word. She leaned into his shoulder. "I thought you left." "I had to go make something right," he said. "But I'm here now, and I'm staying." Bella came next, then the twins, and finally Anna, who just nodded and handed him a mug of cocoa like a quiet truce. Later that evening, when the house had gone quiet again, Maeve sat with Bo on the back porch, wrapped in an old quilt, watching the sun settle behind the trees. "You know," she said, "I've always believed you can't build a home until you bury the past properly." Bo glanced at her. "Did I bury it today?" She nodded. "I think you did." He reached into his coat and pulled something out Caroline's music box. He handed it to Maeve. "Would you keep this for me?" he asked. "Not to forget, just to honor it in a different place." Maeve took it, eyes soft. "I'll keep it beside the wooden swing." They sat together in silence as the last of the light faded, and the night gathered around them like a promise broken once, now whole again. The old diner on Pine and Main was dressed in holiday cheer. Twinkling lights framed the windows, and the smell of cinnamon rolls and hot cider filled the air like nostalgia. On the jukebox, soft Bing Crosby hummed a melody older than anyone in the room. At the long window-side table, now permanently reserved for the Petals, +1, 6 chairs were set. 5 for the girls, 1 for Maeve. And tonight, for the first time, a 7th chair stood proudly at the head of the table, pulled out just enough to say, "This seat is taken." Bo sat in it, with a little girl sleeping on his shoulder and a Santa hat hanging crooked on his head, compliments of the twins. Lottie, half asleep, clutched her bunny and mumbled something about peppermint pancakes. Anna sipped from her mug like a miniature adult, monitoring the syrup-to-plate ratio of her younger sisters. Bella was humming softly, kicking her feet under the table. And Maeve. She sat back, cocoa in hand, watching it all with a softness in her eyes that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with belonging. "You realize," she said, leaning toward Bo, "that this is the first time in 2 years none of them asked to go home early from dinner." Bo glanced around the table. "This is home." Maeve smiled, heart full. "It really is." Debbie, the longtime waitress, approached with a tray stacked high with gingerbread cookies. "Merry early Christmas," she said, setting them down. "And congratulations." Bo raised an eyebrow. "Congratulations," she pointed to the table. "It's not every day I see a man sit at that end of a table and not look like he's about to bolt." Maeve laughed. "He's had a few practice rounds." "Practice," Debbie said. "Honey, this man showed up on a Thursday night and rebuilt a family. I'd say he earned more than cookies." Bo rubbed the back of his neck, flushed. "Thanks, Debbie." She winked. "Don't let her go, sweetheart. This kind of woman only comes around once in a lifetime. And she's already got a squad behind her." As Debbie walked off, Bo turned to Maeve. "She's not wrong." Maeve tilted her head. About which part, he hesitated. "All of it." She rested her hand on his. "You think you're ready for what? To call this real?" Bo looked at the little girl asleep against him, the laughter at the table, the warmth in his chest that hadn't existed in years. "I don't think it's something I call," he said. "I think it already called me." Maeve blinked slowly, lips parted just slightly, as if her heart had whispered something her mouth didn't dare say. Bo reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He opened it and slid something across the table, a hand-carved key smoothed and polished, tied with a simple red ribbon. Maeve picked it up, stunned. "It's not a proposal," he said quickly. "Not yet. It's a promise." To what? To never leave the table again. She looked at the key in her palm, then at him. "Bo, I'm not asking you to rush," he said. "Just to know I'm not going anywhere. This key opens the workshop, or your front door, or even just the part of your heart you thought was locked up for good." Tears stung her eyes, not from sadness, but from recognition. This wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a diamond or a vow. It was better. It was a man saying, "I see your life exactly as it is, and I want in." She closed the pouch and placed it in her coat pocket over her heart. Then slowly, deliberately, She stood, walked around the table, and knelt beside his chair. Lottie stirred slightly but didn't wake. Mavi reached for Beau's hand and pressed her forehead lightly to his. "Then I guess I'd better start setting a place for you." Beau swallowed hard. "You already did." A few booths over a couple in their 60s looked on quietly. The woman nudged her husband and whispered, "That's what love looks like. Right there, in flannel and syrup." The man smiled. "Took me 30 years to figure that out." Mavi and Beau returned to their seats, and the girls erupted into a debate over which cookie shape was best stars versus snowmen. The noise was glorious. Before they left, Anna pulled something from her backpack, a napkin folded neatly with a crayon drawing. She handed it to Debbie. "This is for the wall." Debbie unfolded it and gasped. 7 stick figures around a giant table, each with a name scribbled above them: Beau, Mavi, Anna, Lottie, Bella, the twins. In the center of the table, a wooden key drawn in bright yellow. Above it, in blocky purple letters, "Our table isn't full without him." Debbie smiled misty-eyed. "I think I've got just the spot." She taped it beside the register right under the sign that said, "Be kind." Outside, snow began to fall again, gently this time, like a blessing. Beau lifted Lottie into his arms as they stepped out, Mavi close behind the other girls bounding toward the truck. As he opened the passenger door, Mavi leaned in and said, "You know what? I realized tonight." "What's that?" "That chair," she whispered, "the one we always left empty at the end of the table." He turned to her, waiting. "It was never really empty. It was just waiting for you." Beau's chest rose slowly. He reached for her hand, squeezed it, and smiled. "I think I've been waiting for it too." And as they drove off into the quiet December night engine, humming giggles in the back seat, Lottie finally asleep on Mavi's shoulder, there was no question left in anyone's heart. The chair wasn't empty anymore. Christmas morning arrived in a hush of white. Snow blanketed the countryside like lace, soft and untouched, muffling every sound except the squeals of 5 little girls in fuzzy pajamas running down the stairs of a farmhouse that now echoed with warmth. The tree in the living room leaned ever so slightly, thanks to an enthusiastic attempt by the twins to reach the star, but it stood tall, proud, draped in popcorn garlands and handmade ornaments with crooked lettering and glitter fingerprints. Mavi sat curled on the couch in her flannel robe, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands. Her braid fell loose over one shoulder. She didn't look tired. She looked filled, content, whole. Beau knelt by the tree, handing out presents with the deliberate patience of someone who had once spent many Christmases alone and didn't take this chaos for granted. "Lottie, this one has your name in sparkly ink," he said, handing over a box with pink wrapping and slightly lopsided tape. Lottie beamed. I knew Santa knew my favorite color. Bella Mavi called from the couch, "If you open yours too fast, you won't remember who gave what." Bella giggled. "That's okay. I'll say it's all from Dad." Mavi's eyes darted to Beau. He didn't flinch, didn't look surprised. He simply reached over and tousled Bella's hair like he'd been doing it for years. Later, after the wrapping paper had turned the floor into a sea of crumpled color, and the girls were busy playing with their new treasures, Mavi stood and slipped into the kitchen. She returned moments later, holding a long, thin box wrapped in plain brown paper. "Okay," she said, standing in front of Beau. "My turn." He looked up from where he was helping assemble a dollhouse. "I thought we weren't doing anything big." "We're not," she said. "This isn't big. It's right." She handed him the box. He sat back and peeled away the paper. Inside was a folded piece of aged linen wrapped around a frame. When he unrolled it, his breath caught. It was a hand-stitched cloth bordered in blue thread with 7 small chairs embroidered in a circle, each one a little different. One had bunny ears, another had a heart. One had a wrench stitched onto it. One had a little braid. And in the center, 2 words stitched with quiet reverence, "Ours now." Bo swallowed hard. "Did you make this?" Maivai nodded. "Started it the night Lottie called you Dad. Finished it last week." He reached for her hand. "Maivai." "There's more," she said, pulling something else from her pocket, a key. Not carved from wood, but real metal and polished. "I had a duplicate made," she said simply. "To the front door. To this house." He looked down at the key in his palm, then back up at her. "I'm not asking for a timeline," she continued. "Not asking for a ring or a label or even a drawer. Just asking if you'll keep showing up. Day after day. Meal after meal. Story after story." He smiled. "Quiet, sure. You don't have to ask." She nodded, lips trembling slightly. "Good. Because I think this house stopped being mine the minute you fixed the swing." Bo leaned forward, resting his forehead gently against hers. "Maivai Quinn," he whispered. "There was a time I thought my life ended when Caroline took her last breath. But now, I think it just paused. Like a song waiting for its next verse." Her eyes shimmered. "And what do you hear now?" He glanced around the room. The girls, the tree, the joy that vibrated in the very walls. Laughter. Grace. The sound of belonging. From the kitchen, Anna called out, "Breakfast is ready." We helped. Maivai laughed. That can't possibly be true. They walked in together to find the girls gathered around the table, proudly displaying a stack of slightly burnt pancakes, a bowl of fruit, and a half-empty bottle of maple syrup. The 7 chairs were already set. Lottie patted the seat beside her. "Come sit, Dad." Bo looked at Maivai. She looked back. And they sat, not beside each other, but across. Like bookends, like anchors. As they all bowed their heads for a messy, overlapping, not quite in sync blessing led by Bella. Bo looked across the table at the woman who had walked into his life, carrying 5 fragile hearts and the strength of someone who'd built a home out of memory and mercy. And he smiled. He had been right that first night at the diner. That table wasn't meant for just one. But here now, across pancakes and syrup and steaming mugs and giggling girls, he understood the truth more clearly than ever. The table was never just meant for 1, or even 6. It was always meant for 2. And everything they'd bring with them. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave us a comment. We read each one, and it means more than you know. And if you believe the world needs more stories, like this, stories of kindness, quiet love, and hope that never gives up, please consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us share these moments with more people who need them. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We're so grateful you're here. Until next time, stay kind and take good care.